Got a special video for all of you guys. Batman Forever, 30 years later. In light of Val Kilmer's recent passing, I decided to make this video in honor of his memory. But the first movie that I can recall seeing in theaters 30 years ago when I was 5. My dad took me to see it at the time in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the local United Artists Theater that was in the middle of downtown. I don't remember everything from that experience, but I remember certain images. But I certainly can remember going to see it at the time. Batman Forever is a very interesting movie because it came at a time not only when the genre was in a very different state of quality than it is right now, but in the chronology of the Batman mythos or the Batman movie franchise. This was a huge shift in tone from the Michael Keaton Batman to a completely different actor, which I guess was the continuation of what we had the previous two times. This movie stars Val Kilmer, Nicole Kidman, Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones, Chris O'Donnell, Michael Gough as Alfred. I don't know exactly how to say it, but it's also brought to us by the late Joel Schumacher. In spite of its mixed or average reviews that it got at the time, it was considered a big hit financially, not just because of having Batman in the title, but also the star power that it showcased. As far as the plot, it's basically Batman chasing after Two-Face, who teams up with the Riddler to get back at Batman for various things that he felt Batman did wrong to him. And Bruce Wayne is dealing with his own trauma of his parents, although it's done a little differently here without going through the same origin story plot points that we've seen in other portrayals since then. But we also see the Robin storyline where he adopts Dick Grayson as his ward and they eventually become partners, Batman and Robin. In comparison to its following sequel, over the years I kind of forgot about Batman Forever, but then when I saw Batman Begins at 15 years old, I decided to go back and rewatch Batman Forever. It was certainly a unique experience at the time, and it was certainly easier to understand for me as a teenager, because at 5 years old, obviously I had no clue what was happening. All I was really worried about is Batman gonna be okay? Look out, look out, look out! And my dad told stories to our neighbors how into it I was getting, and he told that story to them until their ears fell off. You can ask him that, he will verify for you. But now in light of Val Kilmer's passing, I decided to give it another rewatch, so I watched it last night as of this recording. I'd say it's perfectly fine. It's not a bad movie, but it's not exactly a home run. If you were to look on the tomato meter, both critics and audience scores, they were not so kind to this. And I could somewhat understand why, but in comparison to the sequel that came out after this, and I'm probably going to be referencing that quite often throughout this video, it is leagues better than what came 2 years after. The film opens with Batman suiting up to go off into the night when he sees the bat signal up in the sky. We see him suiting up, all the sound effects that come with it, him putting on his belt, his glove, getting his gadgets. For some reason I remembered it going on a lot longer, probably because of what happened in the following sequel. I promise guys, I'm trying not to talk too much about that. And you've also heard it before about Batman and Robin, so it's not new ground. And the first line of dialogue is a pretty big indicator of what we're gonna get.
Can I persuade you to take a sandwich with you, sir?
I'll get drive-through.
Okay. Batman is supposed to be very serious, but this is a very lighthearted feel of Batman. And I'm not against that necessarily on principle, because we've had that with the Adam West Batman. But in live action, that's a different story. But also, I like the neo-noir style that it goes for. It feels very similar to the 90s Batman show that was going on at the same time as this release. The design of the cars that are driving around the city are also evocative of the 1940s, which I do kind of like the idea of Batman existing somewhere in a distant past that may or may not line up with our own modern reality. And I could tell that some of this was filmed in New York City, because at one point when Bruce is driving to see Dr. Chase Meridian, this building right here is the Civic Center in Manhattan, but in this movie it's called City Hall. Then we're introduced to Harvey Dent, Two-Face, played by Tommy Lee Jones. Yeah. I'm sure I'm not going to be saying anything original here. I really like Tommy Lee Jones and other movies that he's done. His portrayal of Two-Face is very comical and cartoonish to the point where I can't take it seriously. And I think had he been given different material, he could have made a good Harvey Dent or Two-Face. And this is a tiny nitpick, but I noticed this when I was watching it last night. He flips a coin at least 5 times. The whole point of the character is that he's supposed to flip a coin, and when he sees what side it lands on, then he makes his decision. I get he's trying to toy with this security guard he's holding hostage. This almost feels like Cesar Romero's portrayal of the Joker in the 1960s Batman show with Adam West. Now in that situation, it was perfectly fine, because it was meant to be campy, it was meant to be cartoonish. People didn't view Batman as a dark character back then, unless you were to talk to some really diehard comic book nerds who read certain dark storylines back then. Not really sure if there was a whole lot. As far as the scars on Two-Face, It's fine, I guess. I mean, I don't like to compare him to Aaron Eckhart's portrayal in The Dark Knight, but I felt like that was more of a realistic look on how Harvey Dent could be portrayed in live action. And if you were to go for a heightened reality of some kind, maybe I would be okay with Tommy Lee Jones' design there. I'm indifferent about the design. I don't really care. I will say this, Tommy Lee Jones is really eating it up. He looks like he's having a good time, but this is not what I want to see in a Two-Face portrayal. That's one thing he does amongst a few other things that makes me cringe. So he's able to save that security guard, but not before having a conversation with Dr. Chase Meridian, played by Nicole Kidman. Okay, just bear with me here. She is a stunner in this one.
Please. Oh, my heart! My heart!
And from the moment she meets Batman, she, for the most part, throws herself at him. At least until she meets his alter ego, Bruce Wayne. And then the next morning, we see him at Wayne Enterprises having a meeting with the electronics department head, and we're introduced to Edward Nygma, played by Jim Carrey, who's a big fanboy of Bruce Wayne, and presents an idea that he has for an experiment to manipulate brainwaves to make people feel like they're inside their own shows or movies that they're watching. But due to the potential unethical nature of this experiment, Bruce turns him down. Nygma feels betrayed, and he swears revenge on Bruce Wayne. I talked a lot about Tommy Lee Jones, but as far as Jim Carrey, he's the one thing that people, I think, remember this movie the most for, because it's really Jim Carrey just livening it up in front of the camera, and he was at the height of his fame at the time of this film's release in the 90s with Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, Liar Liar, which came out a little while afterward. It's only when we're in the third act that his portrayal starts to grate on me a little bit. I really like Jim Carrey in anything that he's done. I don't think I've ever seen him be bad in a movie. Sometimes he gets a little too crazy for my liking. Just a little taste problem on my end. Although what he says right here after he knocks this guy out cold makes me roll on the floor hysterically.
Caffeine will kill ya!
Oh, I just remembered something with Wayne Enterprises. As we're swooping in on the building and we see the background of the Gotham skyline, it's noticeably dated CGI. I understand that it's the 1990s and the budget was very different back then, and naturally that stuff's gonna happen, so I'm not entirely upset over that. Not to mention the fact that there's quite a number of Dutch angles throughout this thing, and it goes on and on and on. Even when Batman is riding his Batmobile through the streets of Gotham. I mean, this is obviously not the only film that has done Dutch angles. Kenneth Branagh did that with the first Thor in 2011, but I would say Thor is much tamer in comparison to this. There's also quite a bit of neon lighting throughout this movie, and some of the makeup on these street gangsters, like when Dick Grayson goes to confront those goons on the street corner to save that girl. There's another scene in Batman and Robin where Poison Ivy and Bane go up against these goons to take over their hideout. The way the makeup glows in the dark like that, I think it's a neat detail, but it's also like, I find it kind of distracting some of the time. I'll be fair, this is a little bit nitpicky. I don't know, I feel like the neon lights were somewhat overexposed. It's kind of like the lens flare thing with J.J. Abrams. A lot of people are like, I don't like them or I do like them. And Michael Bay has a similar problem with his use of pyrotechnics and the oversaturated color palette. Every director has their own style, but I think sometimes it's a little too overkill in this one. And at Batman and Robin, it doesn't get any better. As for the design of the Batmobile, it kind of looks like the way the Batmobile looked in the Batman Arkham Asylum video game. It's not exactly a great looking design, but it's whatever. My personal favorite Batmobile is still the Tumbler, and also the one that Robert Pattinson drives in his Batman film. Now, I've obviously been holding off on talking about him, but Val Kilmer as the titular character, I think after watching this, he is an underrated Batman. I know some people are not too fond of him, and I've talked to some people who felt very lukewarm. And when you compare him to the other Batman actors that we've gotten throughout the years, he is, I would say, pretty forgettable. And I think that watching him in this movie, I think he could have made a really good Batman, because he has that look that you would expect to see in someone like Bruce Wayne, where he puts on this facade in front of people to make him look like that he's got it all together. But when you take a closer look behind the eyes, you could tell, no, that's BS. Deep down, he is damaged. All the other Batman actors, except for George Clooney, have been able to portray that in their own ways to their own strengths. I think the material, though, doesn't really serve Val Kilmer, but seeing how he carries himself in certain interactions that he has with Chase Meridian, Robin, and Alfred, I think that he could have had a decent run as Bruce Wayne had he been allowed to come back for the following sequel, but I'm also glad that he didn't come back for that one, for obvious reasons. My two favorite moments with Val Kilmer is when he tries to persuade Dick Grayson from going down the path of revenge, and when he says that he chooses to be Batman, but not because he has to be. As far as that first part, it's nothing that we haven't seen before, but it fits, I think, the Batman mythos. I think it's a very effective look and respect of what Batman is all about. Playing into the Robin storyline, which we'll get to in a moment, he sees what Dick Grayson is going through, having lost his family at the hands of Two-Face, and he tells him, I've been down this path, dude. don't do it. Just like in Spider-Man No Way Home, when Peter's 2 and 3 try to persuade Peter 1 from going down that dark path. And Val Kilmer's portrayal of Batman, even if it may not be the greatest, I would say it will always have a special place in my childhood. Christian Bale is my favorite, and I really like what Robert Pattinson has done. And I've liked some of the others, like Michael Keaton and the late Kevin Conroy, even if it's a voiceover. But Val Kilmer for the Batman mythos, I would say is like what Mick Taylor was for the Rolling Stones. After Brian Jones had passed away, Mick Taylor came in and just quietly served his purpose, never caused any trouble. Of course, if you were to talk to any big Stones fans, they remember Brian and Ronnie Wood, who replaced Mick Taylor afterward. Mick Taylor kind of gets forgotten about, I would say, even though the hardcore fans really like that era. Val Kilmer, I think, is in a very similar vein, with the talents that he did have, being famous for Top Gun, The Saint. I mean, I'm getting a little emotional now talking about this, just remembering the first time I saw this back in the day. Val Kilmer will definitely be missed, and I hope to God that wherever he is on the other side, he's now at peace after that long battle he had with cancer. And watching him in Top Gun Maverick, that hits a lot harder now in hindsight. But Val Kilmer, wherever you are on the other side, if you happen to hear this, thank you for that memory. I will always cherish it forever. Let's talk about Robin. This, I would say, is probably the strongest aspect of Batman Forever. Seeing the Robin storyline play out, Dick Grayson going through his own trauma, losing his family, just like Bruce Wayne did, losing his parents as a child. This aspect of the movie, I think, really adds much needed emotional weight to it. When Two-Face shows up to cause a stir at the circus, and the Flying Graysons intervene to stop the bomb from going off, Dick Grayson throws the bomb out, and then he comes back to see that his family's been killed. It's not just his reaction, but Bruce Wayne's reaction, along with everybody else. With all the campiness surrounding it, it surprisingly takes that aspect very seriously. And I have to mention, this moment right here where we see Dick Grayson responding to his parents' death, that kind of hit me, and I felt for him. And I think Chris O'Donnell made a really good Robin. And, you know, there's been some debate over the years about whether or not we need to see Robin in live action. Some people are hoping for that with Robert Pattinson's portrayal of Batman, that we could see Robin team up with him. I mean, I kind of prefer the partnership between Batman and Commissioner Gordon. I feel like that's just as effective, if not more effective. And I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Robin in live action. As long as they found the right actor and the right pieces to use, I'd be perfectly fine with having Robin fight alongside Batman. And I couldn't help but think of this as I was watching that circus scene. Now, correct me if I got the details wrong on this. I think the whole thing in the Batman comics is when Batman tries to save the Flying Graysons, Tim Drake, who later becomes Robin many years later, was in the crowd watching all this unfold. And throughout the careers of Batman and Robin, he was watching them. And then he later figured out who their identities were. And then when Dick Grayson left to become Nightwing, which is also mentioned as a potential name in this movie too, by Robin himself, he takes Dick Grayson's place as Robin. As I was watching that scene, I thought, you know, it's kind of a bummer that we never got at least a hint of Tim Drake. Can you imagine if they were to do that back then? I mean, they kind of did that with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's portrayal, which was like an amalgamation of the different Robins. I don't know, I'm just kind of rambling right now. But it's not just his interactions with Bruce Wayne. His mentoring that he receives from Alfred, played by Michael Goff? I don't know how to say his name. As far as actor portrayals of Alfred, there has never been a bad one. Michael Caine, I think, is the best, but this guy, I would say, is pretty solid. And since we talked about the emotional weight that this brings, a major issue for me with Batman Forever, whenever we cut between the Riddler and Two-Face and Batman and Robin, very serious to very campy and hokey, it just feels, on my end anyway, kind of like the movie doesn't really know what it's trying to be. It's like it's trying to be a mix of both instead of properly blending in these tones together. Now, when Jim Carrey finally becomes the Riddler and he teams up with Two-Face, I do like kind of seeing the partnership form up. It's very tense and uneasy, since Two-Face can just flip a coin and he might shoot someone in the next moment. And the fact that his hideout is split in two, very conservative and very spicy and decadent. Sugar and Spice are his two girlfriends, and Sugar is played by Drew Barrymore. Let's talk about Chase Meridian, played by Nicole Kidman. Now, Nicole Kidman's a very talented actress and very well respected, and I think she's alright here, but the character is just so one note. As I mentioned earlier, she throws herself at Batman from the moment she sees him, at least until she meets Bruce Wayne when he goes to see her talking about the riddles that Enigma's leaving behind. There's really no character whatsoever, but I do like seeing how she's able to get Bruce to fess up to what he's dealing with his past trauma, and how he's able to reveal to her that he is Batman. As for the chemistry between Kilmer and Kidman, it's whatever. I don't really like to bring that stuff up as much. They could have been played by anybody else, and I think it would have just been the same vibe. They do have their moments, though. It's the car, right? Chicks love the car. But as I mentioned earlier with Jim Carrey on how he's very fun and he has a lot of great lines in here. But as far as his character being wronged by Bruce Wayne, this is an arc that we've seen plenty of times in other films. Amazing Spider-Man 2, The Incredibles. Iron Man 3, Edward Nygma is very awkward and very uncomfortable to be around at first, that we don't really see him act like a normal person. He's very obsessed over Bruce Wayne, that he'll do anything to get back at him. And the Riddler is known to be very obsessed with trying to outsmart Batman with his riddles and his traps and so on. And in the recent Batman movie with Robert Pattinson, I think they were able to show that in the way that made it seem realistic. And even the Arkham games, they were able to showcase that too. And I also couldn't help but notice how similar this felt to Max Dillon in Amazing Spider-Man 2, where it was so awkward and cringe-inducing. I mean, no disrespect to Jamie Foxx. Let's just all agree that was a mistake. As I mentioned with the Riddler leaving these puzzles behind for Bruce Wayne, the one scene that I also really like is when he's able to figure out the identity of the person that's leaving the riddles to him. Bruce is known to be very intelligent, and he's able to figure out things by using certain pieces of knowledge that he's learned throughout his life. I mean, he's called the world's greatest detective, and the other films have been able to show that in their various ways, with Christian Bale and Robert Pattinson, and maybe a little bit of Michael Keaton's portrayal. Probably the most big use of it is with Kevin Conroy's portrayal and voiceover. You all quite bright, sir, despite what people say. I also couldn't help but notice the one shot of Batman's buttocks as he's suiting up in the new Sonar Batman outfit. And I thought, oh dear God, you had to remind me of the opening scene in the next movie. Oh. So the finale is really just them making their way towards the Riddler Island and Batman trying to outsmart the Riddler and Two-Face. Can he save Chase Meridian and Robin both in time? Kind of reminds me of the finale of the first Spider-Man, where Peter has to decide, should he save the kids on the tram or should he save MJ? And he ends up saving both anyway. I was kind of waiting for the Riddler to say, we are who we choose to be. Now choose! But even though Two-Face does die at his own peril by falling from a great height, I like seeing how Robin decides not to go down a dark path of revenge and decides to spare his life, but also feeling some sort of catharsis when he falls to his death. And because of the experiment that Edward Nygma was using, it fries his brain, and he tells Chase Meridian, who suspects that Nygma knows who Batman's identity is, he reveals that he's Batman. Yep, total wacko. Wacko. Is that a technical term? Even though this shot is a little awkward, seeing the silhouettes of Batman and Robin running towards the camera with the bat signal behind it, it is kind of neat to see them officially partnering up to go on their next adventure to fight criminals in the city. And boy, did the nostalgia hit me hard with the two songs playing in the credits, with U2's Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me, and Seal's Kiss from a Rose. The latter of which I still listen to this day. Even though it doesn't fit the character of Batman whatsoever, for me, those two are pretty synonymous with each other. I heard someone say a long time ago that U2's song was for Dick Grayson, Kiss from a Rose was for Bruce Wayne, and I completely agree with that. So really, all in all, Batman Forever is not a horrible movie, but not exactly a great one. You can watch it and have some reasonable fun with it, with Jim Carrey's portrayal of the Riddler, but I would say it's a perfectly harmless take-it-or-leave-it entry in the Batman franchise. Val Kilmer, I would say, is very underrated as Batman, even if he has not-so-great material to work with, but the Robin storyline, I think, is what really elevates the movie to be more than just some of its parts, at least to a point anyway. From the dialogue and the aesthetic, it's pretty dated in a lot of respects. Again, not great, but not terrible. Oh my god, I forgot to mention the music. Elliot Goldenthal's musical score, you can say whatever you want about the rest of the movie. The music in here is really, really good. I don't think it holds a candle to Hans Zimmer's score, or even Danny Elfman, and even Michael Giacchino, but I think in its own way, it does fit the Batman character. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie, and I'll see you guys in the next one.